Good evening, everyone. I'm David Eglin, President of the Society for Contemporary Art, and we are most pleased to welcome all of you to our first program of the SCA season. Tonight, we're welcoming Renée Green, who will be in conversation with Associate Curator Jordan Carter. We are grateful for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago's Conversation at the Edge series and Video Data Bank for partnering with us on this program. Before we turn the camera over to Amy Bestie, Director of Public Programs at Conversations at the Edge, I want to mention some of our upcoming SCA programs and events. On October 20th, the SCA will be hosting Edgar Heap of Birds, an artist and advocate for Indigenous communities worldwide, for a virtual talk entitled Spirit Citizen, Provocative Native American Public Art and Studio Practice. Hendrik Folkerts, now Curator of International Contemporary Art at Moderna Museet Stockholm, leads a Q&A following the lecture. On November 10th, we welcome Chicago-based interdisciplinary artist Maria Gasper, who is on the faculty of the School of the Art Institute. Maria is also founder of the 96 Acres Project, which is a series of community-engaged, site-responsive art projects that focus on ideas about social and restorative justice issues and that examine the impact of incarceration at the Cook County Jail in Chicago. For this stimulating program, Maria will be in conversation with Legacy Russell, Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Kitchen in New York. We also have 3 member-only programs this fall. First, on October 6th, we'll be holding a virtual conversation on the recently opened Barbara Kruger exhibition at the Art Institute. Our own Ann Goldstein and Robin Farrell will be leading a curatorial presentation on this groundbreaking exhibition, which transcends the traditional exhibition space and extends into the museum's public spaces, as well as the city beyond. Then, on October 16th, all SCA members are invited down to Hyde Park for a tour of the Toward Common Cause exhibition at the Smart Museum at the University of Chicago. Curator Abigail Winograd will be leading the walkthrough of this exciting exhibition celebrating the 40th anniversary of the MacArthur Fellows Program. After the Smart Museum tour, we will also be visiting other venues in the Hyde Park neighborhood. So please visit our website for more details about this special day. Our final member-only event will be on November 1st and also focuses on Barbara Kruger with a special SCA members-only in-person viewing of the Kruger exhibition. Much like our Obama Portraits event this past summer, the museum will be open from 6 to 8:30 exclusively for SCA members. This evening offers a unique opportunity to experience the Barbara Kruger show without the usual crowds and hubbub found during normal museum hours. For more information about any of these programs or about becoming an SCA member, please visit the SCA website at scaic.org. Now let me turn the camera over to Amy Bestie to represent our partners at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Thank you, and thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much, David. The School of the Art Institute of Chicago's Conversations at the Edge series and the Video Data Bank are very excited to be in partnership with the SCA on this program. For those of you who don't know, Conversations at the Edge is the school's ongoing series dedicated to the exploration of contemporary and historical media art. And for more details about our program and upcoming programs with artists Linda Benglis, Anocha Suicha Kornpalm, Tulipap Sanjaoran, and Pam Bunsamvicha, please visit our website, which is saic.edu/CATE. And Video Data Bank is one of the largest and oldest distributors of video art with more than 6,000 titles in its collection, including those of Renée Green's. And to find out more about this collection and the artists that the Video Data Bank represents, please visit vdb.org. In addition to today's conversation between Renée Green and Jordan Carter last Thursday at the Jean Siskel Film Center, we also hosted a theatrical screening of Green's Mise en Scène commemorative toile, Partially Buried and Partially Buried Continued, 3 works that Green and Carter will discuss in more detail this evening. If you missed that program, but you still want to see the works, you can virtually through Thursday, September 30th. The program is available free of charge and with closed captions through our website. And again, that's saic.edu/, and I encourage you all to see these great works. So thank you again. And now to introduce Renée Green and Jordan Carter, I'll turn things over to SCA's programming chair, Patty Sternberg.
Thank you, Amy. And again, thank you for your incredible partnership. We are thrilled to be collaborating with both the School of the Art Institute of Chicago's Conversation at the EDGE series and the Video Data Bank. We are also grateful to Javier Anguera for his collaboration in preparing for this program. Tonight, we will hear from Renée Green, who will be in dialogue with Associate Curator Jordan Carter. Their conversation will be followed by a Q&A session. So please submit your questions via the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We are very pleased to welcome Renée Green, an artist, filmmaker, and writer living and working in New York and Somerset, Massachusetts. Renée's artistic practice encompasses film, writing, installation, digital media, architecture, sound-related work, film series, and events that engage with investigations into circuits of relation and exchange over time. Renée focuses on the gaps and shifts in what survives in public and private memories, as well as what has been imagined and invented. Of particular interest to her practice are the effects of a changing transcultural sphere. Solo exhibitions of Renée's work have taken place at the Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts, Harvard University, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, San Francisco, the Museum of Modern Art, New York, National Maritime Museum, Greenwich, Musée Cantonal des Beaux-Arts, Lausanne, Portikus, Frankfurt, Fundació Antoni Tàpies, Barcelona, Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati, Vienna Secession, Stichting de Appel, Amsterdam, Dallas Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, and the Jeu de Paume, Paris, among many others. Her work also entered the Art Institute of Chicago's permanent collection in 2020, due to the generosity of the Claire and Gordon Prussian Fund for Contemporary Art. This fall is a particularly exciting and busy time for Renée, as a large-scale retrospective dedicated to Green's decades-long practice entitled Inevitable Distances will be held at the KW Institute of Contemporary Art and daad Gallery in Berlin this fall. Congratulations, Renée. Please join me now in welcoming Renée Green, and remember to submit your questions throughout the program via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Hello, Renée. It's so nice to have you here and be with you virtually.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, everyone. So before we start our dialogue, our conversation, why don't we set the scene by screening your short 6-minute film, Mise en scène commémorative from 2020.
The story begins in a ramshackle antiques shack in upstate New York. Or perhaps it goes back even farther, to childhood and memories of French provincial furniture displays and department stores. At any rate, I found a bolt of toile fabric with depictions of pastoral scenes from a past Europe, which I took with me to France as a kind of talisman. From a Frenchman, I'd heard that the city of Nantes had some connection with the triangular trade. I went to the city to see what I might find. I walked around the Jardin des Plantes, where plant species from around the world were gathered, and along the port to the Josvan Museum. I began to notice details here and there, an African head over a doorway, a restaurant called L'Esclave, an Afro-Antilles hairdresser. I began asking local people to tell me what they knew of the city's history. I also mentioned the fabric, which was referred to as Indienne and which was produced during the 18th century in that region. In the bedroom of the chateau in which I was housed, in the nearby town of Clisson, was a sofa upholstered in a similar fabric. The scene depicted Pocahontas, Columbus, and George Washington in the New World. What was the history of this pervasive fabric, which in the US could symbolize a mark of distinction, and which in France could represent a prosaic simulation of the past, on which situations open to narration appeared? A fabric you could stare at and make conjectures about while falling asleep. A storybook fabric. Or was it more? I began frequenting the streets of Nantes and its cultural haunts. Its agencies of collection and classification. This is some of what I found.
Comme la toile imprimée et la traite des nègres.
In 1565, in negotiations in Rouen, it is imagined that Africans can be transported from the coast of Africa to the Americas for the exploitation of land. This trade possibility is publicly presented in 1592. The ministry wishes the French Navy and French commerce, in rivalry with Holland, to develop colonies, and the Africans are in their eyes excellent instruments for work. The traffic in human merchandise being a possible source for serious benefits. They are in favor of this. Thus in 1666 an action is passed by Parliament to buy and trade the Africans.
The most beautiful of these fabrics, which the Indians termed chits and the French merchants described as purses, were produced at Patna, at Seranj, at Madras, Negapatam, Porkout, and Sadras Patna. It was about the year 1658 when they first appeared at the fair of Saint-Germain. From this time on they were used as furniture covering and draperies. Rooms were hung with them and they were fashioned also into dressing gowns. The material became scarce and expensive. Some artisans conceived the idea of copying the imported fabrics, and thus the native industry of French India was created.
Between 1511 to 1789, 40 to 50 million Africans would be traded. The trade would officially enter France in 1848.
She is in the toil. Another scene in the floating narrative.
This loss of the till then unshaken sense of my own worth effected a profound change in my life. Above all, it was the isolation.
These are the words of the character Ulrika. But her realization of others' perception of her difference. But for those who don't know that story, they can still enjoy a familiarly styled toil surface of entwining floral vines on their upholstery, but which on closer viewing reveals in its gaps a strange fruit.
So glad that we could begin with that film. And so, you know, as was mentioned earlier, in 2020, the Art Institute acquired Mise-en-Scène Commemorative Toile, but the installation version from 1992 to 93, which is really one of your most renowned and cited multimedia installations. And that same year, 2020, during the COVID-19 quarantine, you made a conceptual return to this work in the form of this short essayistic film. And I'm just really curious to hear a little bit about, you know, what prompted you to return to this installation by way of moving image and just talk a little bit about the work.
Sure. Actually, I just have a question in terms of viewing. I'm seeing on my screen the image. I was wondering if I would see my image as well.
I think if you click gallery view.
Gallery view. Okay, view.
The top right, it should be.
Yeah, I've got view. I don't see that gallery view coming up. Sorry. Okay, here, side by side. Okay, found it. Okay.
So are we here together?
We're together with many people.
Fantastic. No, but yeah, I really sort of enjoyed the way in which this work seemed to really, integrate, the notion of artwork, document, and also sort of contextual device, which I sort of see as sort of a through line sort of in your moving image work in the way that it migrates between these categories and contexts, and just really hoping you can maybe tell us a little bit about, the process of making this film and how it relates to the featured installation.
Okay, I'll try. I think that I part of what prompted it, well, there were several things that prompted it. And one was imagining what could I make during a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, during all of the George Floyd protests and activities that were taking place. What could I do in relation to my work that I was that we were in the process of considering for collection, and also in terms of making any kind of a public announcement about the work. And I wanted to revisit the present as well as think about the past. And I think that you've, Jordan, sent me some questions and an interesting list of things to think about. And so I've been thinking about a lot of those things. And so in terms of this, I'll try to give a context also for my approaches to different things. But in this instance, I wanted to bring the toile to life in a different way. And I also wanted to insert things that maybe were more subtle, that wouldn't be possible to view on upon just looking at a slide, or even being in the space and seeing the installation. And so, because there are a lot of different elements that are taking place, but you don't see them all at once. And that's something that is a trait of my work, that many things are going on simultaneously, but you do not see them necessarily. You might hear something, you might get a glimpse of something. There may be clues that are dropped in different ways, but you wouldn't necessarily have access to the work in its entirety, which is my intention, that it's something that's more gradual. But in the case of wanting to be able to share this work with people who might not know anything about it, and that's one of the things that I was thinking about. And I thought that the short film might be a way to combine a number of different elements. Also, that's one of the things that I really like about using working in cinematic forms, that many things can be compressed into really short time, with all sorts of overlaps of different kinds, with voice and with sound and image and all kinds of things. And so also, being locked down basically during the time with the pandemic, I also was thinking about, well, what is at hand to make something with? And the fabric was at hand, and it was possible. Also thinking about the way that a narrative could be created based on one that I had already written. It's actually in the Other Planes of Their book. It's excerpted from that. It's excerpts from that text. and that's called Collecting Well is the Best Revenge. And that already existed. And so, yeah, it was just a kind of way of combining different elements that I wanted to bring to the forefront and have them move in conjunction with each other.
Definitely. And that really comes across. And I was curious about a few of the choices about sort of the automated voice narrator and sort of this embrace of sort of the glitch and the mispronunciations. So I was just curious if you could speak to that effect, maybe.
Sure. I was interested in using the AI voices because I thought, another level of disorientation to be and unfamiliarity could be interesting, especially if they had something that was recognizable, meaning like a kind of British accent. And so those were the certain reasons for using the voices. And also in terms of shaping the voices, it was interesting to note where the glitches would take place and the ways in which they would take place. And I thought that was kind of interesting and also a little bit funny. But yeah, I liked that aspect of the voices. And so the voices they have an authoritative kind of sound to them, which is often associated with a British accent of certain kinds. But then there were a mixture of accents, and then the male and the female AI voices as well. And so, yeah, I thought that adds another kind of dimension to, in terms of the present, kind of like bringing in contemporary modes of representing. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, I guess to go back in time and to talk about the slide that is currently up, it might be nice to talk about how the installation Mise en Scène Commemorative 12 sort of came into being, the densely layered multi-part installation.
Yeah.
So you were in Clisson for a residency. It's 1991.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of complicated. I mean, it's never simple. It's also, I wanted to mention that in terms of different things that you asked me. And I cannot give you a smooth narrative of what happened. It's not tidy. It's something that emerged in parts. And there are a lot of different aspects I will not myself be able to reconstruct until some later date, I would imagine, with the help of maybe mini notebooks and ephemera. But anyway, yes, I was invited. I received an invitation as part of these different places that exist as contemporary art centers in France, and they invite various people, and I was invited to have an exhibition there in Clisson, and then I by chance had found a piece of toile fabric as it describes in the narrative in upstate New York, for example. And I did take it with me as a kind of, just sort of thinking about, okay, I will see what I discover when I'm there on a visit to see what is there. And yeah, I was taking many photographs. Here are some instances of them, but I was there for a period of time. And so I was going back and forth between, I knew before I went a little bit about Nantes. I had talked with someone who was familiar with the history there to a certain extent. But while I was there, I was kind of in this kind of detective mode of trying to find out more from historians and urban planners about the history of the city. And I was observing a number of different things, and also the agencies and the museums and things that were and the gardens, botanical gardens. Yeah, and so there were, as you see in these images, there's like a mixture of different locations. Some of the locations were also, though, I mixed them in the work, because they also refer to other locations from Paris, also in some of the still photographs. But yes, in the Loire Atlantique, the Archives Départementales, I was doing research there. This was the person who was assisting me, Vanessa, in the archive, and going and to look at all of these different files to locate the ships that had been involved with the slave transport. And so, yeah, I was doing research there, and I was also speaking with local historians about fabric, about toile, because I knew there had been toile produced in the region to a certain extent. And yeah, so in the Loire Valley region, but yeah, these were some of the kind of beginning clues, but it sort of evolved in different ways and became more and more accretive. The longer I was there, the more things I was able to observe, and also through reading and just walking a lot around the area, but also speaking with different people.
And so I guess in the next slide, we can begin to see in this first iteration of mise en scène, not commemorative toile, but mise en scène,
Right.
the way in which sort of these documents, the interviews and the research, the photographs are actually sort of being populated into an installation format and spatialized.
Right.
And I'm sort of curious, maybe you could just walk us through a little bit of some of the components.
Sure, I can just tell you a little bit about it. So you see the structure is triangular to suggest triangular trade, for example. And then I used also elements that were there in the building. And that was one of the things that it's something that I have done and continue to do, looking at the architecture of whatever the site is really, and also finding parts like the sofa, for example, or the settee that's there. It has also kind of toile that was in the building. And so I just got permission to include it in this installation. And I had brought this other fabric that is hanging. I had brought that with me. And so it was a kind of looking to find out whether things that are intuitively imagined are going to link with things that are found in a location, and with doing further investigation in a place. And that's related to also what you do when making a film as well, doing research about the location, and also a lot of reading about it, about whatever it is that you're imagining might take place in that location. And so Jules Verne was also another figure that I was interested in. There's a Jules Verne Museum that was mentioned in the short film in a strange voice. But in these different, they're like files in a way. I thought of them that way. These structures on the floor are a combination of names of ships and the years of the trade, as well as names of languages from all of the locations that from in the African continent that people were brought from, or the languages that were spoken there. And so, yes, and inside you cannot see in this image, but there's some wires you see in these metal tubs. And they have a rotating motorized images, postcards of ships, and they're going spinning around and around and around perpetually. So yeah, that's what's there. And then there is also on the table, it says clé, which means clues, and then tools, outils, that's like magnifying glasses so that you can look, and gloves to look at what's in the box of the clues. And then ambiance for the mood in the room, which is very similar to the soundtrack of the music that was in the short film. So that kind of is diffused throughout the space. Yeah.
So you sort of touched on this with the magnifying glass, but it's really interesting. I'm curious for you to talk a little bit about mise en scène as a strategy or an approach in your installation work, and the way in which most viewers enter the space almost like an unfolding drama.
Yes, I mean, I think of it really that way. I mean, I think a lot of times about it as a set. That's part of what the installation is. It's a set that you enter into this room. In that room, there was also, you cannot see it in this image, but there was a balcony that it faces out. So the light is coming from there. And then you could go out onto the balcony and you see this kind of overview of the space, of the grounds of this kind of chateau, sort of, well, a mimicked chateau in the location. And so all of that kind of combined. And so the person who's the perceiver or spectator, person who comes in, is kind of becomes a part of that particular sort of space. I think especially with the sound and the setting of the location, that kind of creates another kind of atmosphere and mood and frame of reference when you're there. And so, yeah, it's in a way, it's a portable system, you could call it, in a sense, because when it's there as it is here in this image, it's in Clisson, and so it would be different for people who would maybe they come there and see it. If there were local people who saw it, I'm not really sure exactly what they would pick up, but I was in conversation with someone throughout the time that I was there, who was an urban planner and who knew about this history and how that history was also being hidden. And so this was interesting to learn as well. But yeah, so this was 1991, and it was a moment before it was more known in that region about this history. There was a New York Times article that came out later describing some of it, and that the region, I mean, it's not very far from Bordeaux, and that's known more for wine, was not known for the transport of slaves, being part of that trade. So yeah, when it's, I think, I mean, this is something that you mentioned in your many questions, which are very interesting. Thank you. About it, in terms of thinking about sight, for example, what happens with a work when it's related to a location, and when it moves, what happens when it's not in that location any longer. And so I think that it's possible to still grasp some aspect of what is taking place based on all the elements combined. So yeah.
Definitely. And I guess that's a great segue in terms of moving between spaces and sort of the iterative quality of this work, or this system, as you can call it. Sort of, if you go to the next slide, here we can sort of see that installation we were just looking at, but sort of reuse as an image or document within the catalog for World Tour, in which the subsequent work, mise en scène, commemorative toile, would be exhibited at various venues. And just to get into that variation, let's go to the next slide. And maybe talk about how, what we were just looking at in Clisson, you were using, as you said, sort of found toile. It was sort of the conventional sort of pastoral vignette, but you had an impulse to return to once you returned to the United States, I believe it was in the US, that you then decided to intervene within the toile and sort of create your own commemorative toile, really imbuing the stuff of its own making into the fabric with these sort of horrific scenes of slavery and slave uprisings in Haiti and so on.
Yeah, let me just clarify something with that. It was actually a simultaneous process, because I think before I actually went to France, I was working on making a toile. And so that's partly why I had this sample with me. I was sort of thinking about it. I had received the invitation around the same time. And so I was thinking about it, and I was, that's when I was doing a lot of reading and looking for material and thinking about how in different locations, what was taking place within the French Empire. And how that was being considered. And so I was looking at literature a lot also. And this, one of the images here is from a novel by Claire Duras called Eureka. And that's the image of the nun in the right side. And then the other image is an image from Haiti during the Haitian Revolution. And so some of those engravings, it was possible to find in a book that had been compiled of different engravings that had to do with the history of African peoples in art, how it was represented. But thinking about how the mixture of the different moments, how they corresponded in terms of thinking about the 18th century and the toile, also thinking about it in relationship to India. And this is this is mentioned in the text that I wrote. And so thinking about these various forms of empire and movement and transport from Indian Ocean through to the Atlantic and all around and to the Caribbean, weaving in and out was one of the things I was thinking. But I wanted to include all of the parts together, meaning that I wanted to have the pastoral scenes, countryside sort of images of relaxation, leisure, and joy, all juxtaposed with other kinds of moments, which there are maybe 6 or 7 other inserted moments, and they vary. They're not, this one shows a kind of hanging that was meant to represent an aspect of what was taking place in Haiti during the Haitian Revolution. And then I don't know how many other, I mean, we don't have slides of all the different parts of the toile, of the fabric, but there are a variety, and they depict different kinds of aspects. So yeah, that was part of what I was thinking. So I was making that at the fabric workshop. I had started it, I believe, and then we were solving the problem of how to produce it. Yeah. And usually the toile is made from woodblock prints. And in this case, we decided to test using silkscreen and in dropping in the images into a kind of the floral pattern, and it worked. And so yeah, it was exciting to see that it was actually working out in a way that was convincing. So
very
as
much
a toile, yeah.
Sort of, it blends in so innocuously that it makes it even more powerful and sort of resonant with the violence that is actually enacted. But in the next slide, I think we can begin to see, like, so this is the first time in New York, I believe, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1972, that at Hearn Gallery, you showed this work as mise en scène commemorative toile, bringing together the elements from Plisson, or reusing the elements from Plisson with the toile. In the next slide, we see it in World Tour here at MoCA Los Angeles.
Right. At that point, the wallpaper and the fabric had been produced by the fabric workshop, so it was possible to actually exhibit all of the elements together, and that was yeah, a different kind of presentation. Also I didn't mention there's also like a key meaning on the floor to indicate what it is that you see in those different boxes and things, and so it's organized in that way. Mm-hmm.
And it's super interesting, though, to think about how, the initial work from Clisson exists in a museum collection. Mm-hmm. And this is now this variation exists in the collection of the Art Institute, but then the work really actually still continues to sort of be mutable and have different sort of lives. And I think that's really well reflected in the way in which you've mobilized the commemorative toile in separate sort of spaces. So maybe in the next few slides, maybe talk a little bit about Marcel Brotars, which right now we're looking at a slide of Europe in the 70s aspects of recent art, curated by Chicago's very own Annie Rorimer, which is really a groundbreaking exhibition of conceptual art, which included Marcel Brotars, in particular, his Décor in Jardin d'Hiver, or a winter garden, from 1974. And it's interesting because, both you and Brotars sort of in these works mobilize sort of aspects of cliche decor to various ends, be it the potted palm or the toile, and sort of thinking about the decor are thinking about the idea of creating a constructed interior scene within an institutional space as a way to sort of question the ways in which history is constructed, displayed and inhabited, and also to almost really make the institution sort of complicit in these narratives of colonialism and so on. So I'm just curious, you've spoken a bit about your relationship to Brotars, sort of calling him a spectral figure and so on. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about Brotars and this notion of decor and the open letter.
Sure. No, I'm happy to speak about Brotars. The thing is that I go back to the architecture and the location because I think that that's very important in terms of getting a sense of what people are surrounded by. What are they inundated with in terms of their everyday existence? So, for example, in Brussels, where he was living, he was really looking at a lot of colonial sorts of places, and also kind of the traces of the imperial project in Brussels in a way. And I do think that this work, it refers to that to a certain extent. As time passes, it's more possible to understand more and more about how people live in their places where they are living, and what they see and what kind of effect it has on them. And I'm mentioning these things partly because, for example, in terms of thinking about decor or ambiance that I reference in the work that I made, it's a way of picking up a feeling about a place. It's something that might be more intuitive than it is something that's really specifically conscious. It can be something that comes from childhood, and that's what I mentioned that's what's mentioned in the text about collecting Wales' best revenge. Certain things about, like, even French provincial furniture, in my case, in Breuter's case, it would be perhaps the Palais des Beaux-Arts, and the kinds of details that are in the building, the stairwell, the chandeliers, everything, and the botanical gardens that would be surrounding. And so that's something that I was very attracted to. I really was taken by spending time in the botanical gardens, and because they seem to be an indicator of travel in a broad sense, and what was taken from different locations and brought back and planted. In the case, well, when I was in Nantes, in France, and it was really interesting to spend a lot of time there, which I did, just looking at all of the different signs of the plants and the languages that they have been translated into, and the way the locations are noted of where the plant has come from, and the year and the name that's been given to the plant that's related to the person who was maybe the European botanist who found the plant and brought it back. And so this is something that also, it's related to other works that I have made also, but this is something that is connected in some way with Reuters, kind of, and I think that it was not so understood in the earlier moments of reception. And I mentioned Reuters as a spectral figure because when I first encountered an image of Reuters, like mussels, kind of bluish color mussels that covered an art forum cover when I was a student. And I was really curious about it, and I wondered, what's that? You know, it was really, it's kind of compelling and strange. And it's been many years of kind of probing the whole oeuvre of Reuters in different ways. I mean, it sort of pops up in different ways, but there are just certain things that for me are resonant that have to do with writing. They have to do with being and poetry as well, and also being a person who writes and who thinks of language in particular ways, and maybe even something that has to do with synesthesia to a certain extent, because of liking the kind of relationships between color and alphabets and making different associations of that kind. So there's that, and then there's also this kind of decor. And I mean, the decor, spending time in Brussels also, or in particular Brussels, it's interesting, the moment of the emergence of Reuters. I think when it's possible to really go into his writings, which is now much more possible because of his collected writings being available, it creates a very different impression of what his trajectory was compared to the one that I had first encountered. And so, and I like always to go to the words of the artist and try to get a sense of, well, what is it they are saying? You know, what is that's connecting them to their moment, and what it is that attracted them, or that they have issues with, or whatever. And so that's part of what I respond to in terms of Reuters, and the way that now you can, there's a publication, it's from 2012 of collected writings. It's possible to get a really different idea of him in relation to the context of the post-World War II European male living in Brussels at that time, and writing about his generation. What did that generation experience in Brussels? It would be kind of like the Beats in the US, but it's Bohemia, and then also the kind of expansion of the global that starts to move throughout all of the world, meaning forms of technology and media. And so he references pop art, for example, and all kinds of things that are, and cinema. Cinema is a thing that is really like, that's one of the things that resonates a lot for me. So like the decor is also very related to a set. Yes. And it's almost like a set that can be created without making a film necessarily. Exactly. It can be animated by, in this case, it has a camera in the space. And so the people who enter into the space, you see them on the monitor. And when you move around the space. And so it implies things, but it's not it's not didactic. It's not direct. It's indirect.
And contextual for sure. I guess, that was such an amazing sort of answer to that question. But let's just move through the slides so we can move to Partially Buried. We see here, you know, your sort of take on the open letter in reference to Brotow. It's
Yep.
published, it's excerpt from 1992.
Right.
And that slide,
Mhm.
we begin to see how the commemorative toile has been deployed in so many different contexts
Mhm.
from 1993 onwards, really throughout Europe and the United States, and you know, occupying the wall, furniture, and as we'll see it later in the slides, even bodies. So maybe we'll just briefly go through these to see, you know, here we see Vienna, Amsterdam, and de Appel, and Pat Hearn Gallery with Taste Venue, and we can see how global the distribution is here with the print document being in what language is that actually in?
Japanese.
Yeah. So it's really taking a world tour. And at the next slide, we can see Taste Venue. This was a photograph now referred to as This Was Now Then, in which you've really sort of turned the toile, you know, taken that historic, you know, scenes of violence and turned it into almost contemporary fashion in this photo shoot for the New York Times magazine, which is really great. And we have Pat Hearn and your own brother and Jutta Kutter and others as well, sort of, you know, really enveloped and immersed in the fabric in a new way. So it's just really interesting to sort of track the ways in which the toile has been employed, and looking forward to seeing how you'll do it in Berlin as well. But in the next slide, we can again sort of see how it's sort of distributing as well as in print media, as well as spatially. So it's just interesting to think about these different modalities in relationship to the work. And finally, in 2020, how we encountered it, sort of as you sort of put the work kind of back together in this form from World Tour for our acquisition. And we're seeing it here in the viewing room of Bortolami Gallery. And I guess that's a great way to segue to Partially Buried in 3 parts. And I guess we'll just start with Partially Buried 1, and just to maybe talk a bit in the next slide, sorry about that. As you know, during the screening last Thursday and online, viewers will be experiencing the work sort of as a discrete moving image. But it's interesting because you really simultaneously sort of conceptualize the work as a spatial and contextual experience. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about that. And of course, it'd be great to hear a little bit about the film itself and the way in which you really sort of you're really mapping these sort of cultural flows, really using the site of Kent, Ohio, and Robert Smithson, in particular, the artist Robert Smithson, and his Partially Buried Woodshed from 1970 as a way of sort of an entry point to all of these different sort of simultaneities and different parallel, perhaps even contingent histories, traumas, affects, really mapping them using yourself as a cursor in your own sort of lived experience, returning to Ohio as a place that you once called home.
Yeah, it's a lot. There was a lot.
Packing it in there.
I know. There was a lot in that work. And it was something that there were certain kinds of intuitive aspects that overlapped with what I eventually found in the process of looking and visiting the locations like Kent State, for example. But as it's mentioned, as in the film, in Partially Buried, childhood has a role. It has a big role in it. And so this is like really on the level of just sensations, even of like colors, colors associated with that time. And that's part of what you see on the walls, as well as certain kinds of materials like crocheted things and different and so I sort of wanted to use the material or things as I could reconstruct it or think about it in relation to other things that I located or that I represented, for example. But I did a lot of literal searching, like moving around in Ohio, like trying to find things like records, for example, from the 1970s, and also the books, as you see here, Kent State by James Michener, but all of the other, like many other paperbacks that used to be circulating, a lot of James Michener. And just to try to, it's like a set in a way. It's like creating a set, and it was done intentionally as well. You see, I don't know if you can see very well in these images, but they're really like 2 light stands facing this brown chair. And then there's a mirror, and then there's like a blanket that's got lettering on it, and it's meant to be a kind of mimicking of the set of the film Underground, which you can see in, I can't see it very clearly here, but on the monitor that's on the ground, there's an image from the film Underground itself from 1976 that is a reference in part. And so there are, in terms of like the moving image sources and sound, I think there are maybe 5 different sources on different monitors that are scattered throughout this space. And there's also Super 8 projector, and there's also a computer with a CD-ROM. It has a lot of different parts. And then and it has these black and white photographs, which were reshot from the Kent State book by Michener, sort of trying to piece together what was that history that he's describing, and then think about it in relationship to other memories. And so that's part of what are in some of the interviews. Some with family members of mine who were students during that time in Ohio, and they give me their view. I keep asking different people about 1970. What do you remember about 1970? And so that was a kind of basis for a number of the explorations, just kind of questioning people. Some people who were younger than me, other people who were older, and trying to get a sense of if there's anybody, what kind of formation of a history could be made. As a style was actually returning, this was in the 1990s, so 96 was a moment in which, because of those kind of cyclical ways in which fashion takes place, a lot of 70s kind of films referencing the 70s were coming out, like Ice Storm and other ones, Spike Lee, a number of different films that I wrote about them also. So yeah.
That's really amazing. And I guess if we go to the next slide, I think there's a triptych here.
Right. Yeah.
These sort of documentary, sort of not supplements, but sort of different, the word is sort of evading me as to even how
I would call them ephemera from different moments. And so the Life magazine cover, which has an image of Angela Davis and the title, The Making of a Fugitive. So that's 1970, and the text underneath it says "at large," and then the other is I think it's 1992, and that's an image of Angela Davis and Theodore Adorno, which I used in Cologne at an exhibition, my first exhibition at Christian Nagel Gallery, and it says Cologne. And then 1994, London. Afro Power, this is a kind of like what I was describing in terms of the claim. I think it's in The Face, the magazine of that time, or ID magazine. I think it's The Face, it's from The Face, like a style spread with Afro Power. And so, yeah, I was interested in the way that these cycles take place. And the way that there might not be that much of a memory of a history related to something that took place maybe 20 years before, but these style trends were something that seemed to be very prevalent. And so that discrepancy was something that I was really curious about, and also wanting to address in different ways, or just bring to attention that. And so this work, in a way, was a kind of effort of putting many different parts together. And so trying to piece together these childhood memories along with some adult perceptions and all kinds of things through time, and also with relatives as well as with friends and things in different locations. But this was in New York at the I first presented this at the Pat Hearn Gallery.
The next slide, what do we have there? Some stills from the film itself. And I guess I'd be curious,
partially buried film, yeah.
the partially buried film. And I guess I'd be curious to hear a little bit about how Smithson sort of became a protagonist, or became sort of the entry point, or sort of the through line, or as we'll see as in Partially Buried continued as well, because it's such a, it's just such an interesting way in which all of these events and histories coalesce around this sort of no longer extant or partially buried installation, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, for me, it's always the art part is a really important aspect, and how I come to that, and how that also is connected with other things that I find out. And so as that's like an entry point for me in a way, that I'm really, and I mean, I'm not going to claim I can like untangle all the different threads, but it was like, because things take place, they almost seem to take place simultaneously. Exactly. So it's difficult to say, well, anything came first or anything like that. But in terms of Partially Buried, there was a confluence of things. There were a confluence of things that took place. And so one of them was that my mother actually was at Kent State when I was a child. And it was that time, 1970. And then later, of course, I learned about the Smithson work, and I eventually saw, maybe in even a book by Lucy Lepard or something like about Vietnam, with images, the ways that the partially buried woodshed had been taken up, as a kind of like a political image. And so I was really interested in terms of how something that was like, I mean, and then more that I learned about it by talking with the people, some of them at Kent State, who were in contact with Smithson and involved in his invitation as an artist guest to do like a site visit and do something there. It became even more curious to me, the whole thing. But I guess, I mean, in terms of looking at any moment, like looking at a time, looking at a year, and this, I think this is a really cinematic approach, even though the parts are presented as spatial, like installation components. It's almost as if it's like a cinematic approach, in the sense of like, I'm doing the investigation and the readings, and I'm going to visit the site, and I'm trying to pick up a feeling about it. I'm taking a lot of photos and shooting footage, and it's not clear what it's going to necessarily become, but then maybe through the writing, as I'm writing, start to shape both the film and the other spatial work. And so that's just the way that my approach is that's how I work, because it's also, I'm just like I was like one, like just, or two people, it's like, it wasn't like a big crew. And I like this idea of not being a big crew, of being able to think about going to a place and having more of a low key relationship to engaging, being more undercover, I guess, but also still in contact with people in a different way. But so contemporary was a big question at the time for me, of like, well, what is contemporary? If, okay, in the 90s, the 70s is like fashion, how is it possible to think about what's contemporary at any given time? It seems to always be shifting. And is it something that becomes used by the media in some way? Is it capitalized in some way? What happens to whatever it is that's considered to be history? And what's the import of any of it over time? Is it devalued? Is it what happens to it? You know? And so they're actual questions which continue. And they also, you know, they have a lot to do with trying to learn from people while they're alive. And so my father, that was the image of my father, and the first image that was related to partially buried. And then
should we go to continued?
Yeah, because that's when he comes in further. And so this is Uber Truck and Transfer. And so this is a different installation, and it also had some of the parts of the other one. Some of the moving image parts, but it had some other different details. And this work is actually going to be in Berlin at the Kunstwerke at KW, and it's in the Ludwig Museum collection. And this one, the focus is a bit different, and it did grow out of the work at Pat Hearn, but the focus is on German-speaking people who were living in New York, living in the United States, but living in New York at the time that I was working on this work, and I asked them all about 1970 and where were they during that time. And the people are all of German descent, but it's a complex German descent because one is part Iranian, another one is part African, another one is German from radical people from the 60s in Germany. And so that background. And so it was very interesting to talk with each one of them about, I mean, they were really small. They were like maybe 3 years old, or they were very small, but they had opinions about what happened in that time. So that was really interesting for me. And then to combine that with the other work related to it. So that's transfer.
And then we get to Partially Buried Continued, part 3. Partially Buried, Partially Buried trilogy. And here, I mean, in this work, you really are indeed, as you're saying, testing the global, local, global, which was really a word then. It was really something.
It was a word. People were testing that word.
But it's really happening in this moving in. I mean, it's so interesting the way in which, you know, the Smithson so interestingly comes into play as you're actually on the burial grounds of, you know, these many anonymous victims of the Gwangju uprising in 1980. But the film is really also centering your father and his photograph of the Korean War, as well as your own sort of just lived experience as you're in Korea and sort of you're documenting your researching in preparation for the Gwangju Biennial.
Exactly.
All of these things really come together in such a interconnected and associative, but yet it almost feels contingent sort of way. I'm just curious to hear a little bit about this work and your relationship to this film and now, and how it was originally presented, and just to give us a little bit more context around.
Yeah, sure I can. I mean, the thing is, in terms of the way that I work, it has a lot to do with returning to things, and that's something that is a part of most of the work that I do. And so in this sense, I had looked at these slides since childhood that were from the Korean War of my father. And I guess when I was invited to be a part of the Gwangju Biennale, one of the first things I thought about was, well, when I thought of Korea, I thought about the Korean War and my father, and what kinds of images I had seen, and that I was being invited in the 90s for something that was going to be a biennial. And I was invited, actually it was by Julie Lazar and Richard Kachalik from MoCA in Los Angeles. And I was invited to be in a particular section of it called hybrid. And this is something that, okay, I accepted it, and because it was a way to probe further something that I hadn't had a chance to experience myself, but that I had been exposed to these images. And so anyway, yeah, I made 2 trips. The first one to visit, just to go there and see and to meet people. And I learned about the burial ground. So this was in 1997. At the moment that I mean, when I was there, the people weren't talking about that, and nobody was talking about it actually, in terms of Gwangju, and that was one of the reasons, in a way, why the biennial took place in Gwangju, not in Seoul. It was a kind of reparation to the area in some sense. But it was something that many people, especially younger people, weren't really aware of. And so the people who were working with me, who were connected actually to the biennial, and helping with the translation and coming with me, it was a kind of revelation to learn about these different details. And so it was, and so that's what this person, Hae-Soon Kim, who's pictured here in one of the still images, is someone who was who I spent time with her. She was a photographer and part of a photography group. And so part of so that was also another connection to the photographs. What happens when someone who is not a professional is taking photographs, and they have a collection of the photographs, and how is a history being told? And then all of the photographs that were on the grave sites there also, there's a lot of mysterious aspects to what was actually saved and what appeared. And so anyway, for those who saw the film, that's part of what the film is probing, what happens there. But also, how can a person be in any site? Who can be where? And what is it that is an ethical thing to do? And so, yeah, these are recurring issues and questions. But yeah, it was an intense experience, put it that way.
Indeed, and it's just super powerful in the way in which it just resonates so much from first film to this film in ways that couldn't possibly have been, projected or expected.
Not at all. And also the things, in terms of returns, what I like so much about it is that other things emerge from other people over time. And so eventually novels are written, and other works are found and translated at a later time. And so this is also another really interesting aspect of the continuing part of it.
Yeah, the continue, as I feel like is very resonant for all of your work. And speaking of the continued, I think this is a great time to give, I think we're all lucky that you'll give us a little sneak peek of, what is to come, October 23rd at KW and daad Gallery.
I think it opens officially on the 22nd, but it's okay.
And here we see 2 announcements, one including our commemorative toile for the KW exhibition, officially the 22nd, so do not read that.
It's the date in my mind, I guess. Still very focused on that date.
Deadline for sure, it's always and next slide. I also want to encourage everyone to please put in your questions. I think we'll have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions before we have to close it out. But I know one work that will be sort of restaged or sort of contextualized as a system, not in its necessarily its physicality, which maybe you'll be able to elucidate or give us a little bit more information about, is Sites of Genealogy from 1991 at which debuted at PS1 in New York, MoMA PS1 now. It was a piece that really sort of accrued material and meaning over time as you sort of return to 3 sites within the installation. I mean, within the museum building, the attic, the stairwell, and the boiler room, sort of, you know, continuously sort of repeating gestures and actions such as wrapping string around chairs and typewriters and ladders. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about how you're going to, you know, transfer this system and realize this work anew in Berlin.
No, it's a good question. And it's exciting to be able to revisit the work and to acknowledge it as a work in itself. That's already pretty huge. And so, yeah, using the architecture of the KW, I'm going to be presenting the work also in a kind of upper level space and in a cellar space and in the stairwells. And yeah, it's a kind of, the work always was focused on being evocative, and it has a relationship to literature. So very much connected to works, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, and also Native Son, which resonates very much with Chicago in my mind. And so, yeah, this is, and so it will be, it's in process, the whole way that it's going to be presented, but it will be throughout the building. And so it will be something that you will find in these different parts of the building. And it has sound. That's something that it's not evident from these images. And the motion is the person who's moving through the space and finding all of these parts of it spread throughout the building. So that's going to happen. Yeah.
Amazing.
It gives me a chance to return, you know, so I can reread a lot of things that have been published. Yeah.
Amazing that it's taken you 30 years to return because you're so good at returning.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of different stories, many stories.
Seems like a great opportunity to revisit this work, and it's super exciting. And I'm so looking forward to how you're going to restage, recontextualize, re-engage all of these works in a retrospective that I'm sure will be very different than that usual notion of the retrospective.
Yeah, that is the intention. Inevitable distances. It is meant to be a way to approach the work and to sort of note how it doesn't match what might have been thought this artist has produced. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was one of the incentives of actually Mason Lever Yap, who was the person who invited me. They wanted to probe the unknown. So that's one of the other aspects of it.
Thank you so much, Renee. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can open it up to questions. Let's see what the audience has to ask. We have a question from Hugo Ivan Juarez, which is, I am wondering if you have revisited some of these places or prior works years later, Gwangju, Nantes, and Kent, and how does your personal history affect your return to these sites?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. In some instances, I haven't physically revisited, but I return to them in ways that I can. In some ways, it's through people who live in the places and who I'm still in contact with. And I mean, that is definitely the case with Gwangju and in Korea. I was just in contact 2 days ago with one of the people that I had met during that time. But also I think I learn more about the places as the time passes, or learn in a different way through other means. I was mentioning what's written. And so, for example, the novel Human Acts that was written and translated, I think, into English from Korean just in like 2016. And so and I'm in the process of reading that book, but it's about that time. So it's really interesting to learn about what younger people might do and make in terms of things that have happened in a location and historically. But what other places were there? There were, I have not been back to Nantes, but I've had continual contact in France and also with people from there, and also where I am now. I'm actually, it was mentioned, I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is adjacent to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard University is and where MIT is, where I work. And so I'm in contact also with a number of younger people from all around the world, and like Korea. And so it's been interesting to also get their impressions about the works when they see them, and we continue to discuss about the locations. And so, yeah, I'm in the school, I work in the School of Architecture and Planning. And so that's also another aspect that, relates to people going to the places and things. So no, I haven't myself been the one going, but other people have been going. And so for me, once I make something somewhere, it's an ongoing thing. It's not as if it's just ending. It's not meant to be extractive.
100%. It's a continual revisiting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of travel, I think we have time for this one last question, which is, I think, a really great question. Do you travel for pleasure, or all the time when you travel around the world, are you always working and researching? How do you the trajectory from your research and working body?
Sorry, I missed the last part of it.
How do you separate like your own sort of personal trajectory from your researching and working body?
Well, I'd like to. That's my goal. That's a wish. Yeah, sure. I'm not working all the time, but I'm working a lot. And that's something that I'd like to change. I'd like to be able to have other kinds of experiences beyond that. But the working part is something that, it's something I enjoy. It comes out of curiosity also. And wondering about different places and situations and things like that. But it's a really good question. It's something that has arisen and that I am working on, not working.
Well, thank you so much, Renée. Thank you for doing a little bit more work by engaging. And while you're so deep in preparations for your amazing retrospective opening in less than a month. And I just want to thank you for your generosity. And you're about to go on in just 5 minutes to meet with students at SAIC. So we're just so grateful for all of your time and your deep thought and everything that you do. So just thank you. And I also want to thank, of course, Javier Angera and Free Agent Media, as well as the Society for Contemporary Art and Conversations at the Edge and Video Data Bank for this amazing collaboration and making the screening, both in person, virtual, and this conversation possible. So thank you, and thank everyone who joined us this evening. Have a lovely evening.